Picture a world on the brink of nuclear destruction. The year is 1962. The United States and the Soviet Union are locked in a deadly arms race. This was a time of intense geopolitical tension, a period we now refer to as the Cold War. The world had been carved into two spheres of influence, and the battle lines were drawn not on the ground, but on the ideological front. The United States, under the leadership of President John F. Kennedy, was flexing its military might, showcasing its superiority in nuclear arsenal. On the other side of the Iron Curtain was the Soviet Union, led by Premier Nikita Khrushchev, a man determined to level the playing field. The Bay of Pigs invasion had just taken place a year earlier, in 1961. This failed attempt by the US to overthrow the communist government in Cuba had a significant impact. It embarrassed the US on the international stage and pushed Cuba further into the arms of the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, the arms race was in full swing. Both superpowers were building up their nuclear capabilities at a breakneck pace, each trying to outdo the other. The stakes were high and the margin for error was razor thin. Any misstep could lead to an all-out nuclear war, a scenario that would have catastrophic consequences for the entire world. Key figures like President Kennedy and Premier Khrushchev were under immense pressure. Their decisions could either lead to a peaceful resolution or escalate the situation further. It was a delicate balancing act, a dance on the edge of the abyss. These were the circumstances in which two of the world's most powerful nations found themselves. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the world held its breath as the countdown to crisis began. These were the precursors to what would become the Cuban Missile Crisis. In October 1962, American intelligence discovered an unsettling truth. The Soviets had clandestinely installed nuclear missiles in Cuba, a stone's throw away from the United States mainland. This discovery wasn't a result of a lucky break or a careless slip-up by the Soviets, but rather a meticulous, strategic operation by American intelligence agencies. High above Cuban airspace, U-2 spy planes, the eyes and ears of the United States, captured a series of aerial reconnaissance photographs. These photos offered indisputable proof of the Soviet nuclear buildup. The images revealed missile launch sites under construction, as well as the presence of medium-range ballistic missiles, capable of striking deep into the heart of the United States. The implications were dire. The balance of power was shifting. The Cold War, a conflict marked by proxy wars and diplomatic standoffs, suddenly felt incredibly real and terrifyingly close to home. The United States was now under direct threat from its Cold War adversary. President Kennedy, faced with an unthinkable dilemma, had to decide the best course of action. This was a time of intense pressure, a decision-making crucible like no other. Kennedy, aware of the gravity of the situation, quickly established the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, or EXCOM, a team of his most trusted advisors. Their job was to help the president navigate through this perilous moment in history. The debate within EXCOM was fierce and divided. Some favored immediate military action, a preemptive strike to eliminate the threat. Others argued for a diplomatic solution, fearing that military action would undoubtedly escalate into full-blown nuclear war. It was a decision that would shape the world for decades to come. In the end, Kennedy chose a path that was neither purely military nor diplomatic. He chose a naval blockade, a quarantine around Cuba. A choice that was a risky middle ground, but one that kept the door open for negotiation. The blockade was a high-risk strategy, a test of wills between two superpowers. The United States, under the leadership of President Kennedy, implemented a naval blockade, or what they termed a quarantine, around Cuba. This was a bold move to prevent further Soviet missiles from arriving on Cuban shores. The American Navy was given orders to stop and search any Soviet ship heading towards Cuba, a clear violation of international law. As American and Soviet ships faced off in the Caribbean Sea, the world held its breath. The tension was palpable, the stakes unimaginably high. Each side stood firm, neither willing to back down, each waiting for the other to blink first. It was a perilous dance on the razor's edge of disaster. But the blockade did its job. The Soviet ships turned back, providing the first real sigh of relief in this crisis. While the blockade held, secret negotiations were taking place. Behind the scenes, frantic diplomatic efforts were underway. As the world teetered on the edge of nuclear war, secret communication channels buzzed with life. These back-channel communications, kept away from the prying eyes of the public, became the lifeline for peace. Now, let's delve into the covert negotiations between the United States and the Soviet Union. It was a high-stakes game of chess, with the world's future hanging in the balance. The two superpowers had to tread carefully, each move carrying the weight of potential nuclear annihilation. Critical to this process were the letters exchanged between President Kennedy and Premier Khrushchev. These letters, filled with veiled threats and desperate pleas for peace, reflected the tension of the times. They were the silent paper warriors of this crisis, battling it out within the confines of diplomatic decorum. These secret negotiations, fraught with tension and uncertainty, would eventually lead to a resolution. These secret negotiations would bring the world back from the brink of war. The resolution of the Cuban Missile Crisis was a delicate balancing act. The world held its breath as two superpowers danced on the edge of the apocalypse, each step heavy with the weight of potential nuclear warfare. An agreement began to take shape, one born of compromise and necessity. The Soviets would dismantle their missiles in Cuba, a commitment to de-escalation that would help to pull us all back from the brink. This was a significant step, a move away from aggression, and a decision that would change the course of history. However, this agreement was not one-sided. The United States had its part to play, its promises to make. Publicly, the US promised not to invade Cuba, a pledge that would guarantee the protection of a small island nation caught in the crossfire of two giants. This promise was a beacon of hope, a sign of respect for national sovereignty in a world too often marked by force and coercion. Yet, there was another aspect of the agreement, one shrouded in secrecy. The United States had agreed to dismantle its own missile sites in Turkey, a move that mirrored the Soviets' actions in Cuba. This part of the agreement, however, would remain a secret, hidden from the public eye. The balance of power required a public show of strength and a private concession of parity. In this way, the crisis was delicately diffused, each step towards resolution a testament to the power of diplomacy and compromise in the face of unimaginable stakes. It was a dance of diplomacy on a razor's edge, a balancing act of monumental proportions. The crisis was over, but its impact was far from finished. The world had stared into the abyss of nuclear war and had somehow managed to step back. But the echoes of those 13 days would resonate for years to come, shaping the future of international relations and forever reminding us of the thin line between peace and nuclear war. The Cuban Missile Crisis left a lasting impact on US-Soviet relations and the world. The aftermath of the crisis was characterized by a shift in the world's perspective on nuclear warfare, with the realization that a hair trigger could plunge us into a nuclear apocalypse. This pivotal event in history led to the establishment of the Moscow-Washington Hotline, a direct line of communication between the leaders of the two superpowers. This hotline was a symbol of hope, an assurance that dialogue was possible even amidst the deepest of tensions. The crisis also had a profound impact on US-Soviet relations. It was a moment of reckoning, a turning point that led to a mutual understanding of the need for restraint and diplomacy over aggression and dominance. This shift in attitude paved the way for future arms control agreements, marking a significant shift in nuclear diplomacy. The Cuban Missile Crisis serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of nuclear escalation. The Cuban Missile Crisis, a chilling chapter of the Cold War, holds valuable lessons for us today. A 13-day standoff that brought the world to the brink of nuclear war, it serves as a stark reminder of the devastating potential of nuclear weapons and the importance of diplomacy in conflict resolution. The crisis underscored the critical role of communication, both open and covert, in averting disaster. The secret negotiations, the back-channel communications, and the exchange of letters between Kennedy and Khrushchev were instrumental in diffusing the situation. Moreover, the crisis highlighted the importance of measured decision-making. Kennedy's decision to opt for a naval blockade rather than a direct military strike, despite pressure from his advisors, was pivotal in preventing an escalation. The Cuban Missile Crisis is a testament to the power of diplomacy over force. As we look back on those 13 days in 1962, we are reminded of the thin line between peace and nuclear war.